penitently come under Order 1B. Without taking much time of the Senate, I will not go into the expletives of reading through, and I'm very sure that my colleagues are well attuned to this order. I'm coming under this order as Senate spokesperson. And I think I have been given this privilege to do an explanation of some goings on in the Senate. Precisely on February 28th, last week. Actually, I'm very pertinently for that matter.
Just read the order that you are talking about. Are you coming under privilege or coming under, because any senator can rise at any point in time under Order 10,
yes,
where the senator feels that his privilege is breached. But if you are coming under Order
1B,
yes,
in all cases not provided for in this standing order, in all cases not provided for in this standing order, or by season or other orders or practice.
Order 10 says any senator may rise at any time to speak of and shall be prepared to move a motion without notice.
As conscientiously guided, I want to join Order 10 with this order. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, Senator Adarabodu approached me about a matter that concerns the dignity of the Senate. And he said he would like to come under Order 1B and under Order 10 that talks about privilege. So is it the view of the Senate that they be allowed to proceed? Those in support say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You may proceed.
Thank you. Like I was explaining, precisely last week, Thursday, February 20, there was what the media called drama on the floor of the chamber, which the senators will call a kind of procedural infraction. Like I said also, that I was seriously impassioned to speak on this, because the Senate actually got a bloody nose throughout last week over this issue. And it bordered seriously on the orders of proceedings in the Senate. And we know that orders, the standing orders in the Senate, is the Senate's catechism, and this is what rules the Senate, because we are ruled by rules, laws, statutes, and orders. This extreme intransigence and obduracy drew a lot of public comments. Majority of those comments very negative for the Senate. And precisely it happened to one of our colleagues, that's Senator Natasha who, against Order 6 of our standing order, whereby the Senate President is variously and particularly strengthened by the statutes to allocate seats to senators. And we know that within the Senate chamber, a senator can be allocated any seat. And since no senator is allocated a seat outside the Senate chamber, we think that the Senate President is in order in this wise. But like I said, that the infraction degenerated to the extent that our colleague disagreed in order to stand by the orders of the Senate while raising a point of order. And we know that when you are in the Senate or in the legislation, when you are not in order, you cannot raise a point of order. You have to be in order to ask for order. As this was not enough, the media trolled the Senate variously and precariously from that Thursday. And I, as the spokesperson of the Senate, I had to go about trying to mend those broken pieces of the images and integrity of the 10th Senate, which I think should not have happened. And like I said, I reiterated that the Senate is not for skit making. It's not for content creation, whereby we show off before cameras, before the media to take pictures, take shots, snapshots, TikTok, and so on and so forth. And then we exhibit so that we can play the underdog, and then the general public, who might be very oblivious of the guiding rules of the Senate, can poo-poo the Senate. So this brouhaha went on up till today. And I know, because as we are here, some media houses are still even inviting me to come and explain off further what transpired. But, Mr. President, my hunch is not whether a senator can raise any issue within the chamber, because we know we enjoy absolute privilege. But absolute privilege is not absolute disobedience. We know that one. I just want to behold my colleagues that the popular saying that as you lay your bed, so you shall sleep on it. Are we laying this bed very well and decently for us to sleep very well, have very good dreams for Nigeria? We are all here, 109 of us, Mr. President and my colleagues, sent to this place by our constituents for 3 major reasons: to make laws for the good governance of Nigeria, to advocate for our constituencies, various ones for that matter, and to do oversight functions of the MDAs. And anything outside this, we look at it as privileges, not only the sitting arrangement in the Senate. And we all subscribe to the leadership of the 10th Senate under Senate President, Senator Godwin Obot Akpabio. And like what I experienced, the whole thing, some people, a section of the public, are now narrowing it to Mr. Senate President versus a senator, which is not so. Because our guiding rules, which is our testament and our catechism, our own Bible and our own Quran, which we all subscribe to religiously, embodies and epitomizes the whole Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Any action against it is an action against the Senate. It's not an action against the Senate President. Mr. President, sir, we were told when we were growing up as toddlers that where there is no law, there's no sin. But we have laws. Then it means that any contravention of that law is a sin. And where there is sin, there must be penalty. And where there is penalty, we expect penitence. And going further, it's not about the sitting arrangement only. We are made to believe about, to see expletives being rained on the leadership of the Senate, on the allocation of committees, which dividendly we ask, were we voted for in our constituencies as chairmen or committee members? No. We have our primary assignment, secondary and tertiary assignment. These are just auxiliary assignments. Mr. President, I don't want to take too much of our time explaining myself off. Explaining myself off. But, like I said, I want the leadership of the Senate to stand by the rules. And when infractions are being committed, because we can see a liturgy of it, that some people have done it before, nothing happened. Some other people are taking it. I, as your spokesperson and an image maker, when an image is broken beyond recognition, then to make that image become very Herculean, almost impossible. And so for me, I'm just, without submitting a report, which I will still do later, want to thank my colleagues and the President of the Senate for giving me this opportunity to present to you the happenings in the Senate and outside the Senate in the past 6 days. Dear colleagues, I so submit. Thank you very seriously. Prayer. I should not pray any prayer. Yes. It's not a substantive motion. I want to metamorphose.
If you don't have any prayer, okay. So Senator Jimo Ibrahim.
In supporting Senator Adaramodu, I want to emphasize that the integrity of the Senate cannot be compromised. This is the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And like you said in the morning, even at the Constitution, Section 1, Subsection 2, any act of even National Assembly that is inconsistent with the provision of the Constitution is void to the extent of its inconsistency. So any behavior, any act or omission of any senator that stand inconsistent with the provision of the Red Book, our guideline, is void and of no effect. And as a matter of fact, the men in chambers are people of integrity. Mr. Senate President, I am very privileged to be here as a senator to meet very distinguished names that I've been hearing on the front of newspapers. So, Mr. Senate President, the men that are seated here are men of integrity, and their names are protective. Even yourself, Your Excellency, you serve as governor for 8 years. You have been minister. You have been conferred with national honors. So this integrity cannot be destroyed in one day. And like I said, I quoted you this morning. You said any act of parliament that is inconsistent with the provision of the Constitution is to the extent of its consistency void and of no effect. Attorney General of Bender State and Attorney General of Federation. Any behavior, any act or omission of any senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that is inconsistent with the Red Book is to the extent of its consistency void and of no effect. And we owe the public a duty of explanation, which I think Adaramodu has formulated and distilled very well. It's not an emotional matter. And we have very many committees in the Senate that handle issues like this. The Ethics Committee is there. We could refer matters like this to them to give us better diagnosis of the issue and what we can do in accordance with our rule. I'm not above the law of the Senate. And like I said, I am very privileged, and I mean it, to come to this floor of the Senate and see men of integrity, honor here that dignify the chamber. The chamber is not about you alone, Mr. Senate President. It's about everybody. And sitting arrangement is something that is not even too significant. I am at the back seat, but I can lend my voice. In fact, Mr. Senate President, the former Senate President, very distinguished Senator Ahmed Lawal, is at the very back seat after my own. Look at my own seat. Look at his own seat. And he's not complaining. He will raise up his hand with respect here, and will still go there to bow for his respect, because he's a man of integrity. So why can somebody say, can anybody be at the back seat more than him here? I am not against Natasha. I'm not for anybody. I'm just saying that the Senate is an institution, and that institution needs to have at its dashboard integrity as number one driving force in the dashboard of the Nigeria Senate. And our Senate President must be respected. Let me say lastly, the Senate President government, as far as I know, is dwell in the thesis of liberalism, cooperation and collaboration. And you cannot take this one away from the Senate President. That is his trait and taxonomies and behavior. But there is extent to this collaboration and cooperation in the face of the Red Book. I challenge you, Mr. Senate President. Your collaboration and cooperation as a liberalist, which I know you of, in the face of the Red Book supersedes whatever liberalism you want to advocate in the floor of the Senate. So I support my very distinguished colleague, and I think matters like this should be handled by Ethics Committee. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is one of those moments that I would love to stand up to make a general appeal to our colleagues. To begin with, Mr. President, be rest assured that you have our vote of confidence as a Senate, because this is not about you. This is about us as an institution. This is about our rules and procedure, our practices and convention, and parliamentary tradition that we are sustaining in this place. So,
you just said something now. Please,
yes.
Just a minute. Those statement of the leader that the Senate President has the support and the love of the entire 10 Senate, say aye. Aye. And those against say nay. The ayes have it. So the Senate leader, whatever you say is from the pulpit.
Well, thank you.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Enough to speak at this time. Early enough is that there is no one of our colleagues here who does not have an opinion on this issue. Whether they even speak out or not, everybody has an opinion. But we are all united on one thing. Our rules must be respected, because that is what binds us together. People will serve for 8 years as governor, chief executive in states. People will serve as honorable ministers of this federal republic, and they will still go to the nooks and crannies of their villages and constituencies to go and contest election to come to this hallowed chamber. It is because there is something about the Senate. And under our watch, we are not going to allow this institution to be discredited. We are not going to leave behind, for those coming after us, an institution that is any weaker than what we inherited. So when it comes to protecting the integrity and credibility of this institution, no one takes it for granted. Let me also make it clear to members of public that the whole simi ulabalu about one of our colleagues, Senator Natasha Akpoti Uduaghan, being asked to move to another seat is nothing that has to do with gender. It's nothing that has to do with hatred. It's nothing that has to do with any form of malice. For the record, let me say again, distinguished Senator Adamu Alero, who had been governor for 8 years, who had been honorable minister, and who is one of the most ranking senators in this Senate today, was asked to move his seat. And he didn't make any issue out of it. We had a reason to change the seat of His Excellency distinguished Senator Aminu Waziri Tamboa. He didn't make any issue out of it. Senator Jarigbe, Jarigbe, we had a reason to move his seat. He didn't make an issue. Senator Wadada, we moved his seat. He didn't make an issue out of it. That's on the minority side. On the majority side, we had reasons to move the seat, change the seats of the likes of Senator Wamako, obviously one of the most ranking senators here, two-time governor before. He didn't make any issue. Senator Olamilekon will change his seat. Senator, that's the chairman of appropriation. Senator Adetokunbo Abiru will change his, and several other people here. And part of the reason that necessitated our recent decision to change seat was because at least 3 people, 3 distinguished colleagues, had moved from the minority aisle to the majority aisle. First was distinguished Senator Ifeanyi Uba of blessed memory. And then Senator Ezenwa Francis Oyewuchi moved. And then lately, distinguished Senator Ned Nwoko moved. All of this necessitated a change in our seating arrangement because we needed to readjust. Of course, I understood why distinguished Senator Adaramodu would be concerned. He's our image maker, he's our spokesperson. And most of all listened to the interview that distinguished Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan granted unbarricaded. She exercised her right to speak, but the question was about the contents of what she said, whether it was the truth or not. Sir, we have a committee that is in charge of how much of a strength of character we display as elected members of this Senate, how much of respect to the rules of this Senate that we display. That is the Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petition. That committee has a responsibility not only to investigate whatever alleged, refusal to obey our rules or display of lack of strength of character, but the committee also has a responsibility to ensure that the privileges of the affected senator are also protected. And it is important that rather than all sitting here to debate this issue, that we just allow this matter, most respectfully, to be referred to our Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petition, so that the committee can deal with this issue and probably in a week or two come back to us. And that will form the basis of our further debate and action on this matter. What Senator Adaramodu presented was a general report, and he had to come under Order 1B because it was not on the other paper for today, and he did it well. But it was not for him to make any prayer. It was not a substantive motion that he was bringing. He has laid his report before us. I beg most respectfully, let's refer this matter to our Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petition, and they will get back to us so that right after this, we can go into an executive session and discuss other issues of public importance. But on this matter, I pray that we do not debate it any further. Let's just refer it to the appropriate committee. I so submit.
Well, the leader more or less has finally arrived at a motion before us that we should refer the entirety of the saga to our Ethics, Code of Conduct, and Public Petitions to revert back to us. But let me just read this for the record. I'm sitting today as Senate President. Tomorrow I will not be here. One day I will not be here. Another person will be here. I was a member of the 8th Senate. Today I'm a member of the 10th Senate. I believe strongly it's only God that knows who will be a member of the 9th Senate, or the 11th Senate, 12th Senate. The institution remains. Even as I'm talking now, Senator Buhari knows that the rule allows the senator to sit anywhere, but if you need to make contribution, you must go back to your seat. And part of maintenance of order from the presiding officer is that where a particular senator perambulates too much around the Senate, you recognize him to speak. So most times, that senator, I won't mention the name, will have to run from here straight to his seat because he knows the rule. He knows the rule. He knows the rule that he has to speak from his seat. Even the first time the issue came up here, our distinguished sister was not even speaking from her seat. And that was when we tried to call her to order. I think part of the problem is when people come from courts, court-declared senators, they miss the orientation. The management of the National Assembly is hereby ordered to organize periodic orientation, particularly for senators who are midstreamers, who can midstream and did not start when their colleagues started. Because I remember that this particular senator on the day she was sworn in, raised her hand to speak. I was scared, but I had to recognize her because I was saying, you just gave her the rule book. Part of what we give to you when you are sworn in is a standing order of the Senate. So I said, has she even opened the rule book to know what she's going to say? But she made the contribution on that day. I think 2 days later, she brought a motion. There's nothing wrong in being vibrant, but there's a lot wrong when you don't know anything about the procedure. You can't be a Reverend Father and go and start the church service with communion. You must lay foundation. So let me refer you to section 66 of our rule book. Section 66, subsection 1. It says, the President of the Senate or the chairman, maybe while sitting as chairman of committee of the whole, after having called the attention of the Senate or of the committee to the conduct of a senator who persists in irrelevance or tedious repetition, either of his own arguments or of the argument used by other senators in debate, may direct him to discontinue his speech. So even when you are talking, the Senate President has a right to ask you to discontinue your speech. And then section 66(2) says, if such a senator refuses to resume his or her seat, this is the first time the rule book is even referring to her. The President of the Senate, or in the case of sitting as chairman of committee of the whole, shall order such a senator whose conduct is grossly disorderly to withdraw immediately from the Senate during the remainder of that day's sitting. The President of the Senate shall order such a senator to withdraw in the event that he views her conduct or his conduct to be disorderly for the remainder of that day's sitting. And the Sergeant at Arms shall act on such orders, or he may receive from the chair in pursuance of this or that. All the Senate President will do is to order that senator to stop talking. And if that senator persists, then the Senate President will now say, withdraw for the remainder of the day. Please leave the chambers. And then he doesn't even need to call on the Sergeant at Arms. It is the job of the Sergeant at Arms to immediately enforce that order. Now, I want to take us to section 55. I don't want to go down. You go through that section 66, you'll see others. But look at 55. Behavior of senators in the Senate. This one is a general thing. We must read this when given to us. It's like a Bible in the church. It's like a Quran in the mosque. At the entry, or let's say, during a sitting, that is section 55(2), all senators shall enter, 5(5). All senators, during a sitting, all senators shall enter or leave the Senate with decorum. It means that the sanctity of the Senate must be maintained. And please go through it. You'll see what is expected of a senator. You can't even cross the floor during sittings. You can't chew chewing gum during sittings. You can't make phone calls during sittings. You cannot even drink water in the chambers during sittings. You can't pass between chairs. At the point of putting a question during sitting, no senator can step out of the chamber. When a senator is speaking, no senator can pass his front or pass between chairs. When the President of the Senate is putting a question, that is section 55(7), no senator may walk out of or cross the floor of the Senate. When the question is being put, you are expected to be seated on your seat. Even to converse, to discuss amongst yourselves, when a senator is speaking, it has to be in very low tone so that you don't disturb the chambers. Then if you go to section 6, subsection 1, the President of the Senate shall allocate a seat to each senator. Sub 2 says, a senator may only speak from the seat allocated to him, provided that the President of the Senate may change that allocation from time to time. It's not me that made these rules. So even without giving reason of defection, decampment, or anything, the Senate President can observe, as they are calling me in the social media, headmaster. The headmaster can observe that two senators are too close, and they are always discussing. And it says, in order to ensure the sanctity and decorum of the Senate, Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari, move to the next seat. You are too close to Sahabi Yao. You move to this other seat. And it must be obeyed. If you want to be a senator, please learn that this is our guiding principle. All the things that they are saying outside. Here, this book here gives the power to the Senate President to even suspend a senator for at least 14 legislative days without reference to any committee. And that means if we are sitting 3 times in a week, that comes to about 5 weeks without reference to any committee. And that stands. But on that day, you will notice that after we pleaded with her to speak from her seat, and she refused, I think our colleagues rushed to her and attempted to mute her microphone. I did not mute the microphone because, as at that day, we didn't have the capacity for the Senate President to mute the microphone from here because of the new installation we have here. Our colleagues went there and tried to mute the microphone to plead with her not to talk. But later on, I sent somebody from here to go and tell them to unmute the microphone so that she can ventilate her grievances. I wanted to hear why she would not move. But when I listened to what Senator Daramodu brought, I found out that the reason why she did not obey the Senate standing order was because she wanted to position herself where the camera can see her. And so the standing orders of the Senate will not matter unless she sits where the cameras can see her. But I want to let you know that here is an instrument placed before the Senate President that the moment you press that you want to talk, it gives a signal here. So whether I see you directly by raising your hand or not, I will see you on the instrument before me. So there is no senator that is not covered here. There is no place that you speak from that the camera will not catch you. So I want to say that we have a motion on the floor. Distinguished Minority Leader, please everybody should go back and study the rules very well so that we stop the idea of washing our dirty linen in public as if we are not guided by laws. We are lawmakers. We cannot also be lawbreakers. Yes.
I remain Abba Moro. And I want to say that I rise to align myself completely with the submissions of the leader of the Senate. And Mr. President, to say that by the consensus of the senators here, that we align with the rules of the Senate and that the drama of the day in question was avoidable. Mr. President, I want to say that on that day, one of us from our zone rose up here and openly apologized on behalf of our colleague from North Central on the behavior on the floor of the Senate of that day. Essentially because this is about the Senate, and this is about the leadership of the Senate. Mr. President, you may want to recall that in the 9th Senate that I was part of, due to some inexplicable reasons, and some persons who are here, especially the Sergeant at Arms, would have noticed that some reorganization took place, and they took me there, over there, where management staff and the cameras and where. I was the only person who, sorry, COVID. Okay, that's why I say for inexplicable reasons. You say COVID. Okay, COVID. Mr. President, I was taken there. I was the only one affected by the so-called COVID. So I sat there for months. Then one day I called Sergeant at Arms. I said, this place that I'm sitting there, because the camera was not taking me, because all the cameras were there. So the camera was not taking me, and I was not making contribution. I said, why now? Is this where you go and sit me here? And the seats behind were empty. Then I was struggling to go behind. But they sat me there for some time, but luckily they intervened and took me to the mainstream. This one belongs to opposition. This one belongs to majority party. That one, I don't know which one it belongs to, you know. But on a more serious note, Mr. President, I still want to repeat the apology that was rendered that day, because our rules are there, and these rules are rules that must be obeyed. And so I agree completely, and I want my colleagues to agree completely too. Mr. President, we're sorry for what happened, because the Senate has been in the public domain for discussions that are definitely not for what we were elected here. And we can avoid this distraction. And like I said, we have committees, and one particular committee is responsible for detecting infractions of our rules and possible recommendations, even sanctions. But Mr. President, we see you as first one among equals, but the presiding officer of this Senate, and therefore the father of this Senate. In spite of some provocations, in spite of some offenses, Mr. President, we ask you to tolerate some of our actions that are not in tandem with democratic and parliamentary practices. These things once in a while will occur, but please, we want to ask that while we are referring this matter to a relevant committee, let us ponder on the drama that unfolded on that day and see how we can mitigate against the possible consequences on the integrity and the image of this institution so that we can move forward in the interest of this country. I so submit, Mr. President.
Suggestion that the matter should be referred to a committee.
That this matter be referred to our Committee on Ethics and Public Petitions.
By consensus, the Senate leader has moved a motion and has been seconded. Those in support that the disorderly conduct of our colleague, distinguished Senator Natasha be referred to the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges for necessary further action, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So the matter is hereby referred to the Committee on Ethics and Privileges and Committee on Conduct, Code of Conduct, Ethics and of course, and Public Petitions. Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions, headed by distinguished Senator Neda Imaspen, to look into it and advise the Senate revert to us within 2 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Well, Mr. President and very distinguished colleagues, of the leadership of the two chambers, as both the Senate and the House of Representatives, that a significant part of this week should be devoted to the public hearing and other necessary activities centered around a thorough understanding of the tax reform bills pending before the two chambers. And in view of this, the House of Representatives, as a matter of fact, will not be resuming sitting until next week. So I am rising to move that this Senate do adjourn until Tuesday, no, Wednesday. Okay, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, rising to move that the Senate be now adjourned till Wednesday, the 5th day of March 2025 at 11 a.m. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Second.
Distinguished colleagues, the motion has been moved and seconded. Those in support say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. We resume on the 5th day of March 2025 at 11 a.m. prompt.